Evening from beautiful Raleigh, North Carolina. My name is Dustin Hurst, and this is Freedom Bros. We have been gone for a while now, but we are back with a heck of a show for you tonight. We've got Scott Cleveland, who is going to challenge RINO liberal Republican Mike Simpson in Idaho's 2nd Congressional District, a guy who I have no idea how he keeps getting reelected, but he does. And we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about a whole lot more with Scott Cleveland. Guys, it's been too long, and I'm sorry. I want to be clear, and explain. Greg and I have been working on a couple different projects. I can't talk about some of them, but we've been doing some organizational rebuilding behind the scenes of a couple different organizations. Working on I've been working on my day job, which is why I'm in Raleigh, which is, something that I do and I love doing. But we also have families and stuff like that. So we've been doing that. We kind of put the show on the back burner for a little bit, but we are back and we've got a good show for you tonight. To start things off, though, I'm going to play our way too loud and needs to be adjusted stinger, and we'll get the energy going, and we'll bring in Scott Cleveland in just a second. This is episode 30 of Freedom Bros. Someday we will be able to afford an editor to bring the volume on that way down by like 75%, but today is not that day. So before we get to Scott Cleveland, just a couple things, a couple housekeeping notes. I see Brian Ullman is in the chat already. Hey Brian, good to see you. If you are not subscribed or subscribed to or following Gem State Chronicle, which is his publication, you need to be. We haven't had a really good conservative columnist in Idaho for a while. And that's not a slight to anybody else who has written about conservative policies, but Brian is at the Capitol every day writing about what's going on. He's live tweeting. Brian and I don't see eye to eye on everything, right? He likes Trump. I don't. That's actually the biggest difference between us. But that said, Brian's writing is incredibly valuable. If you, as a conservative, want to know what's going on in the Capitol, I strongly suggest you follow Brian on Twitter. Go to Gem State Chronicle, read what he's doing. He's getting mega traffic. It's really impressive to see. So I shouldn't be advertising other people's products, but I guess it works. It's an important thing. And I know a lot of conservatives, they want to stay up with the news. They want to be informed, but they don't know where to go. IFF is a good source, but Brian's is a really, really good spot. So with that said, man, it's been a hell of a year already. It's January 25th. We haven't had a show. I don't even remember when our last show was. I think it was before Christmas, but I went through COVID over Christmas with my family, like literally slept most of Christmas Day. Greg has been working on stuff with the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance. And by the way, there are tons of gun bills coming this year, tons of them. I think there are like 4, but in Idaho, that's a ton because we typically don't see gun bills because we're pretty good on guns. But there are some tweaks that need to be made to state law. So if you're not paying attention to the Idaho Second Amendment Alliance right now, you need to be. There's some stuff happening. Stand your ground reform. And honestly, I wish Greg was here because I don't know all the things that he's doing. But make sure you go check out ISAA and become a supporter. That's how these things get done. That's how change is made, is supporting Greg and the work that he does. Now, let's get to the good part of our show. Mike Simpson has been just a feature of Idaho politics for as long as I can remember, longer than I've been in doing Idaho politics, probably since before I was born. The guy has been here forever. Brian, if you want to look up stats on how long he's been in Idaho politics, I would love that. But he is certainly past his prime if he ever had a prime. And I want to be clear, Freedom Bros has a policy that any candidate can come on our show and say whatever they want, as long as it's not scandalous, right? Even that might be fun. But can come into the show, make a pitch to voters, tell us what they're about, share their platform. So, Mike, if you want to come defend your liberal record on Freedom Bros, you're more than welcome. But right now, we've got Scott Cleveland, his conservative challenger for the May 2024 primary, on Freedom Bros with us. Hey, Scott, how you doing?
Hey, checking in. I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show, Dustin.
Now, for all of our loyal listeners and viewers, Scott is doing Power Hour right now because he just got off a 2-hour Zoom call with people he was meeting with about his campaign, and he still volunteered to come in and do another hour of video call with us. So thanks for being willing to do that, Scott. That's huge.
That's great. It's great to be here. I'm happy to be on your show.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Appreciate your time. It's an election year. Things are going to get crazy, and oh yeah, there's Brian. He's been in Congress since forever. 99. Whew, that's long. That's a long time. Scott, this is about you now. Tell us who you are, what your background is, how you made your money, how your career, stuff like that. Tell people who you are so we can get to know you.
I'd be happy to do that. A little bit of background is easy enough. I've been married to my lovely wife, Kathy. We just celebrated 35 years last Sunday. So I'm proud of that fact. Kathy and I are both originally natives of the failed state of New Mexico, as it were.
Okay.
Which is, if you visited New Mexico lately, it's become like a third world country with the crime and the drugs and the deviant behavior there. It's unfortunate, but I would certainly never return back there other than to visit family. My wife, Kathy, and I moved up to the Treasure Valley area in January of 2006 as part of a corporate transfer. For the last 35 years, I've been in the investment advisory business. I own a small boutique financial advising firm in Eagle. It's called 4C Financial Group. I'm self-employed. I've done that for the last 10 years or so. So I'm blessed in many regards that I have the freedom of my schedule that allows me to travel, to do politics, and anything else that needs to be done. So that's a little bit about my background. I'll hit a few more highlights if you like.
Yeah, go ahead. I want people to know who you are as much as you can tell them, because I think that's a good connection between voter and candidate.
Sure. Well, like I said, I've been in business for a long time now. I'm 62 years old. I have a few good years left in me, and I've been very active in my community. Through various civic organizations. I've been the treasurer of this, that, and the other. I've been the president of the Treasure Valley Estate Planning Council as part of my work. I'm a former candidate for the United States Senate. You may remember 2 years ago, I'm going back here a little bit. 2 years ago, I ran for the United States Senate seat currently held by Republican Mike Crapo. And I ran for that seat as an independent. I'm a conservative, a lifelong Republican, but out of strategy, I ran against Mike Crapo, and I learned a lot and made valuable contacts, but I also gained valuable experience. That didn't leave a bad taste in my mouth. And here we are 2 years later, and I don't know if I hit my head somewhere along life's highway or people talked me into it, but I'm committed to running and defeating my opponent, Mike Simpson, which we'll get to Mike here in a little while. But I'm a regular guy. I don't smoke. I don't drink. I don't do a lot of crazy stuff. But I like to fish. I like auto racing a lot. I like Mexican food, and I'm a real busy guy. I'm a person that likes to get things done, and I'm rarely found sitting around not doing much of anything. My entry into politics was predicated in right after the 2020 election. Many of us feel that the election results were not quite legit when President Biden was put into the White House. A lot of people still question that, and I was one of those people. I had a lot of folks, my friends, family, and clients, very frustrated by that, and they came together and said, "What can we do about it?" And I said, well, I don't know if I have the answers as to what we can do about it, but I know if we form a group and start taking action steps, that's going to be a lot more productive than just sitting around, complaining about the circumstances that we found ourselves in. So right here in Eagle, where my office is, we founded a group called the Treasure Valley Council of Patriots. That just rolls off the tongue, doesn't it? TV COP for short. Treasure Valley Council of Patriots. And we started meeting every Tuesday night. And we've met every Tuesday night for 3.5 years. And the group has grown, and it's basically a political activist group. It's strictly conservatives only. We don't let any commies or leftists join our group to balance things out. We have no interest in hearing that. And what we do is get involved in local political races, certainly statewide races. We vet candidates. We discuss issues. We've had gubernatorial candidates come in and talk to our group. We go through ballot initiatives. We go to rallies once in a while, and we participate in the process. And that's real important.
Okay, that's super helpful. That's awesome. I love citizen activism. I think that's the only way we keep our republic.
Right.
I mean,
right.
And keeping the republic is something we'll talk about later. But you mentioned, let's start here. You mentioned your run for Senate in 2022. Obviously, that was not successful, or else you wouldn't be running here. What did you learn from that campaign that you're bringing to this one?
Well, being a financial guy, I look at a lot of the statistics, I look at a lot of the numbers, and I look at a lot of historical voting data. And when you look at what happens in the political world in Idaho in particular, what happens is this. It's real straightforward. You have a primary, and the incumbents are extremely difficult to defeat, next to impossible, but not impossible. Because people in Idaho just tend to vote for the guy that has the R beside his name. And I get that, and I understand that. So when I decided to challenge Mike Crapo, I certainly could have remained as a Republican and entered a very crowded primary race. He had 5 challengers in 2020. And in the primary, you're going up against a campaign that has at the beginning $6 million, $7 million. And then you have this crowded field of challengers. There were good people. They had honest intentions. They had legitimate reasons for running for office. But there's no possible way that you're going to upset an incumbent like Mike Crapo running on the Republican ticket under that system. And so I thought, why would I ask my supporters? Why would I spend all my time and money and energy doing that? When you lose in the May primary, it's game over. You're not on the ballot. My reasoning was simple. The only possible way, even a long shot, an uphill battle, to win an election like that is to be on the ballot in November when it counts.
Right.
And in order to do that, I decided to change my registration status temporarily as an independent. And under state law, the requirement is you have to gather 1,000 signatures of registered voters on a statewide race. Those signatures have to be certified by the county clerks. You then have to submit those to the Secretary of State's office, and then and only then are you on the ballot in November. So we did that. I was trying to build my name recognition, gain experience, and travel the beautiful state of Idaho and meet people. And from that regard, we were very successful at it. And for a first-time candidate, hey, we did okay. I got about 50,000 votes. That's not bad for a guy who's never run for office before.
Right.
So I learned how it works, both on the good side and the bad side. And to finish answering your question, what I learned is if you want to get treated like a redheaded stepchild, just go ahead and run as an independent. Because you don't get any love from your former Republican friends. You're not allowed to speak at the Lincoln dinners, Lincoln lunches. You're not going to get the microphone. It's hard to raise money because they're used to writing checks to Republican only candidates. I'm not complaining. My strategy was sound, but this time around we're going about it a different way, and that's part of what we learned.
Listen, Scott, you don't have to tell me about being hated because I'm a literal registered libertarian, right? I am probably one of the most hated political animals in all of politics because Democrats hate me, right. Republicans hate me, and other libertarians hate me too. Like that's a thing.
Right.
I have made a promise to return to the Republican Party for a very specific purpose, but we'll get into that later.
Yeah. So along those lines, what I did was after my race, I re-registered immediately back into the party. Had to smooth a few ruffled feathers, as it were. With some of the higher ups. But all was good, and we moved forward. And what I did though was I deliberately got very, very active in Ada County politics.
Right.
And that's a big gong show. It has been for the last year and a half. And I started going to every meeting and volunteering and doing my part. And slowly over time, the precinct committee people realized that maybe the leadership wasn't quite doing the things that they should be doing. And there was a very public resignation of 6 of the 7 officers of the Ada County GOP.
Right.
And shortly thereafter, I was elected to the 3rd vice chairman, where I currently sit as the 3rd vice chairman of the Ada County GOP. And we're pressing forward with, a new beginning, so to speak. And it actually feels really good.
Let's talk about that geography for a second while we're here.
Right.
Obviously, you live in Ada County. The state of Ada is a common
Yes.
refrain among people who do not live here.
Right.
I've lived in eastern Idaho. It's too damn
Right.
cold over there. I
Right.
respect people who live there. Can't do it.
Right.
I've lived in North Idaho, and I would live there if the capital was there.
Right.
Great. I love North Idaho. But you live
Right.
here. How are
Yes.
you going to, one of the biggest complaints that I see or criticisms from people who live over there, they're going to say, well, Scott, you don't understand our agricultural way of life. You live in the state of Ada. You've never been a farmer. You've never raised a cow or whatever the hell farmers and ranchers do. I don't know. I'm
Right.
not one. And I respect them, but I'm not one. How are you going to connect with the people who say, you're not one of us?
Right. Well, that's a great question. So let's talk about the state. There's confusion amongst people. When you run for Senate, they say, well, which district are you in? And I say, no, when you run for Senate, there is no district. It's the whole state.
Right.
Which was a lot of fun. We made, I think I counted 6 road trips from the Treasure Valley clear up to the Coeur d'Alene area. And that is a 7.5-hour drive on a 2-lane road. So
Yep.
you know the geography, but not everybody does. And I enjoyed that. But this time we only have to campaign on half of the state because, as you know, the House of Representatives, we have District 1 and District 2. So District 2 is definitely all of eastern Idaho, southeastern Idaho.
Right.
But it comes to a point right here in the Treasure Valley. It comes up the Boise River, and the dividing line is kind of like Highway 55, State Street, and then
Right.
Eagle Road. And Eagle Road runs down to about Overland, and then it cuts back to the east again. So
Right.
I'm not the one, Dustin, that drew the boundary.
Right. No,
Okay. I am just as much a part of District 2 as
I believe
somebody over in Rexburg or anywhere else over there.
Right.
So the boundary is the boundary. And I'm within that. I have lived here for 18, 19 years. So it's not like I just parachuted in. And it's a beautiful part of the state. And, I know people roll their eyes and say, oh, the great state of Ada. And I'm prepared for that on the campaign trail. You know what my response to that is? I'm
What's
from
that?
the good half of Ada County.
Yeah, no, I feel that. I feel that. So
Right.
let me, probably the biggest question for you, I've done campaigns before. I run a PAC. I know how politics work. I've been doing this for 15 years now, right?
That's good.
My biggest worry about your campaign is that it's January. You're announcing in 6 days officially, which is awesome. I think he needs a challenger.
Right.
You got into the game a little bit late,
Yeah.
looking at challenging an entrenched incumbent who's going to have
Right.
lots of special interest dollars. Why
Yes.
is that? How are you going to deal with that? How are you going to make up ground?
Okay. Well, we might be getting in a little bit late, but I'm not overly concerned about that. And here's the reason. I was hoping there would be another strong challenger, maybe from the eastern part of the state, that might step in and try to take on Mike Simpson, because I'm definitely not a fan. But I have a lot of contacts over there. I talked to people like Janice McGeehan and the Nates and other folks that I know pretty well on that side of the state that would have name recognition and maybe the wherewithal to defeat Mike Simpson. And over the months through the summer and into last fall, nobody raised their hand. Everybody says, no, I'm going to sit this one out. No, I'm going to sit this one out. And it went all the way up until about the winter meeting of the state central party here. It was held here in Meridian. I don't know, about a month ago or so. And, I had been considering it, but I was waiting to see, because again, I don't want to take on a bunch of other challengers.
Right.
If there's a bunch of challengers in this race against Mike Simpson, The challengers lose, and he gets to spend another 2 years in Washington, D.C. Well,
Right.
nobody raised their hand. And so I finally prayed about it, talked to some people, and I looked at the numbers, and I'll give you this logic. In 2018, Mike Simpson was unchallenged and had 100% of the vote in the primary. 2 years later, he had a challenger or two, and he received 72%, but his vote total went down.
Right.
Just 2 years ago, he was challenged by Brian Smith for the second time, as you're aware.
Right.
But Mike Simpson only garnered 54% of the vote. So 172, 54. If that's not trending the right direction, I think he's beatable just
Right.
based on that. I would also contend that he is less popular today among the ranching and farming and ag community because of a particular stance of his than he certainly was 2 years ago. And, I'm not here to pick on Brian Smith or anything like that, but Brian Smith was not the ideal candidate to take on Mike Simpson. He did pretty well, but Mike Simpson is not infallible. And, we'll talk as much as you like to about him, but that's the trend. That's the number.
Okay. Before we get to Simpson, because I think there are so many problems with his record, we could literally spend till I have to wake up tomorrow morning here in Raleigh about how bad his record is. But again, I want to get to know you.
Okay.
So here's an interesting question, and you can go back in time if you need to, but Congress has a ton of members, 435 members, right?
Right.
Gives a wide range of personalities and political ideologies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is there a member of Congress that you say you're elected that you would study under, or if it's not a current member of Congress, that you would want your career to emulate? Who would you be like? Would you be, a Russ Fulcher, a Raul Labrador? Would you be a Matt Gaetz? Would you be Chip Roy? I want to know who you want to be, who you follow.
Well, I think on that spectrum, I think the name that you mentioned, Russ Fulcher, would be a good one. Russ has done a good job. He hasn't been there too long. He's been there long enough to be experienced. He is a Freedom Caucus member, though, and so I do align with the Freedom Caucus movement. But I'm not out there on the far right side of things where I'm throwing political hand grenades at people, because I think people are well, and to get elected, you have to at least be partially likable.
Yep.
So
I don't care.
I'm not willing to bend my principles. I know where you're coming from, but I'm on the right side of things, and I think Russ Fulcher would probably be the closest one that I would emulate. Not Crapo, not Risch, and certainly not Mike Simpson.
What do you think of, obviously, I hope you've been paying attention to congressional politics as you've pondered your run. Some of my friends and I disagree on what happened with Matt Gaetz and the speaker, Kevin McCarthy, Mike Johnson.
Right.
What do you think of that whole situation? Did Matt Gaetz play it right? Is Johnson a good speaker? Tell me your thoughts there of the current Congress.
Well, you have 435 members there, and they're not all going to agree, but you know what they say about politicians, and I tend to agree with them. The old saying is politicians are like diapers. They should be changed often and for the same reason.
Right.
And that's kind of how I feel about most incumbents. The founding fathers of this country did not have in mind for you to make a 25, 30, 35 year or more career in Washington, D.C. And that's what it's become. And sadly, America is headed in the wrong direction. And it's because these people are so well entrenched in Washington, D.C., that they no longer serve the interest of everyday average Americans like you and I. And the system is broken, and it's not getting better. Entity is the same thing over and over again, expecting different results. We keep electing these same kind of leaders, these incumbents, and they're not fixing anything. And my frustration was what prompted me to get in and run. But I'm not an angry politician. What I am, I'm a person that's resolved. That's the word that I like to use. I'm resolved to go to Washington and serve a couple terms in the House or the Senate, what have you. Like I said, I'm 62 years old. I don't need the fame or fortune or any of that kind of thing. I want to go serve for a little while and then finish it up and go get on with my life. And that's what we need, other people like-minded to do that.
I want to touch on something you just told me, because I have opinions and we all can disagree as conservatives, liberty people. I have largely stopped caring about the shenanigans in Washington, D.C., largely because I can't make an effect there. I absolutely cannot make a difference there with the scope of my influence, with my platform, with the tools I have. I can't do anything. So I don't care. Like, I don't even care. Yes. I'm not caucusing. I don't care about the presidential election. Nothing.
Right. Sure.
Now, you said, it's broken. It needs to be fixed.
Right.
I think most Americans would agree with that assessment. But the question I have for you is, can it be fixed? And how do we fix it? And I don't mean this disrespectfully, but changing, electing new people may or may not fix it. Like, how do we fix this?
I understand. Well, we didn't get into this mess that we're in overnight. So if you think of the bell curve and things go up and things go back down the other side, America's problems are fixable because many of them are self-inflicted. But the good news is they are reversible, but it's going to take time, whether we're talking about border security or inflation or any of these other things. Sadly, the predicament that we're in, and I'll use the southern border as an example, that is not an accident. That is a deliberate policy decision on the current administration to leave our borders wide open. And it is wreaking havoc across our great nation. Totally unacceptable. Now, I've been on the campaign trail for a couple of years, and I hear a lot of politicians talk about the problem. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to restate or even describe or bemoan what the problem is. What voters want to hear, and people like me, is what are you going to do about it if you get into office? If I vote for you, what is your policy? What steps are you going to take to change whatever you're complaining about? And that's what I try to do when I answer questions. Now, as far as one person making the difference, somebody is going to represent the 2nd Congressional District of Idaho 2 years from now, 4 years from now, 6 years from now. I'm willing to do that job. Not too many people are willing to throw their name in, but it is very, very important that a true conservative that matches the values of Idahoans have that seat. And I'm not here to make personal attacks on Mike Simpson, but I'll make this analogy because I think it'll hit home with most folks. If Mike Simpson were a pickup truck,
oh boy,
Mike Simpson would be a pickup truck with 400,000 miles on the odometer. It doesn't mean he was a bad pickup truck. He served well for many years. He served his purpose. But 2 years from now, 4 years from now, we know he's not going to be there. And the question for the voters is okay, do you want to start shopping and get a new vehicle now before you blow the motor or the transmission out of the truck with 400,000 miles on it?
Right.
That's the analogy that I like to make. And that's partly why I'm running for office.
So what you could say, and if I remember correctly, this could be Idaho's Cash for Clunkers program, because I believe Mike Simpson voted for Cash for Clunkers. So that's what you're trying to take a clunker out of the game. That's probably right.
It's a simple analogy, but it works pretty well. Now, I'm not a brand new truck. I got a couple miles on my odometer. I'm at least broken in, but not 400,000 miles.
Fair enough. The other question that I obviously circulated that we were doing this interview and people texted me questions and stuff like that.
Right.
A few people wondered, why not run for the state legislature first, right? And let me preface that question, right? You live in Eagle. I know the politics of Eagle. There's one massive RINO there are actually a couple, but there's one in the legislature in Eagle that needs to be retired, and you seem to be an effective campaigner. Why not go do that, where you could have a little bit more influence right off the bat and then delay the run for Congress? Why not take that path?
That's a great question. So I lived in Eagle for the first, I don't know, 12 years that we were here. But about 5 years ago, my wife Kathy and I, we moved up a river from Eagle proper, just over the line in Garden City. So I'm a resident of Garden City, which is District 1600. My office is still over there in Eagle, and
Okay.
everybody associates me with Eagle because I spend most of my waking hours there. But being a resident of Garden City puts you in a new legislative district,
Okay. That
and it's
explains
blue,
it.
blue, blue. It's blue, blue. There's two blues and another blue, and I'm not interested in fighting in that.
Right.
I do help support legislators in the state house as best I can. But again, it's not the end of my life if I don't make it to the United States Congress, but I'm willing to
Right.
try to go serve our people.
Yeah, fair enough. And for those who aren't aware, I believe Dennis Mansfield ran for Senate in 16 last time. I love Dennis Mansfield. He's not necessarily the most conservative guy in the world,
Right.
but he actually would have been a really good fit. If Dennis Mansfield
That's right.
can win in 16, Republicans can't win in 16. You would need like almost like a Nikki Haley, and I don't think that she could actually win in 16. It's
right. So the blue from Boise, the city of Boise, has gone downriver, and we've kind of stopped it right there at the Eagle Garden City line, so to speak. So
let's build a wall around Boise and make Lauren
right,
McLean pay for it.
right, exactly.
So just a programming note, if you're in the comments, you're watching the show tonight, first of all, we appreciate you. This is how we keep our republic, is making sure we understand the candidates who want to serve us and who want to represent our interests in Congress and in the State House. If you have questions for Scott Cleveland, drop them in the comment section. I'd be more than happy to ask them, as long as they're not stupid. And maybe even some stupid ones. We'll see. Scott, getting back to you, what was the moment, like the moment you knew you were going to run? What was that like? How did you come to that decision? You said you prayed about it, but was there more? Like, just dive into that for a second, will you?
Well, I'm not sure if you're referring to my race for the United States Senate.
No, the decision to run
this time around.
Yeah.
Well, I'd always had it in the back of my mind, and at first I wasn't that crazy about running for the House of Representatives for any number of reasons. It's a tremendous amount of work. I'm not afraid of hard work. My wife Kathy campaigned extremely hard with me, and it took her a full year. It took both of us a full year to recover from a statewide race like that.
Yeah, I bet.
But then once we recovered and got our feet under us, we're looking at it, and we're just looking at the lousy job that the people in Washington are doing by and large. Are there a handful of good ones back there? Would I say that Russ Fulcher does a reasonable job? I'd say he does. Okay, but the rest of that whole bunch back there, they're just doing a lousy job, and it's not rocket science what a congressman has to do. You look at an issue, you look at the legislation, and decide if this is a good thing or a bad thing, and you say yay or nay.
Right.
It's not rocket scientist. And I finally just said, you know what? I have the resolve and the wherewithal and the blessings in my life to be able to do this. And I've always been a strong patriot. I believe in this country. I'm not ready to give up on it. And I do think we can right the ship, but not if people sit on their hands. And I'm not a person that's willing to sit on my hands and complain about things. I'm an action person. And win, lose, or draw, right or wrong, I'm not afraid of Mike Simpson in his 25 years in office. I think that's the problem. I think people are tired of that. I think people are looking for fresh ideas, fresh voices. I think it's time we clean house, literally. Now, I'm not talking about draining the swamp. The swamp is much larger than Congress.
Right.
You've been to Washington, D.C. It's surrounded by giant buildings full of bureaucrats. So draining the swamp is a nifty slogan, but a much larger challenge. I'm not going there to drain the swamp. I'm going there to clean the house, which is Idaho's house and Mike Simpson's seat in particular.
So let me ask you, let's get into, we've got about 26 minutes left. Let's dive into issues, Simpson's record, et cetera, your feelings on issues. You kind of touched on issues before, and I know what your answer is going to be, but I'll ask anyway. What is the number one problem facing America today?
Okay. America as a whole, I would say nothing can be bigger than the southern border invasion. Let's call it what it is. It's not an immigration policy problem. It's not the immigration reform. Our country is deliberately being invaded by millions of people, and that is being facilitated by our federal government. As of today, you see this battle between the governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, trying to defend not only his own state and his people, but the rest of America from this invasion. And yet the Biden administration and the Supreme Court is going up against the state of Texas.
Right.
So we're living in really interesting times. But the long-term effects of an open border is not something our country can survive. We're an economic life raft, but you can't put 100 people in a little two-man raft and expect it to end well. And that's
Yep.
what's going on. That has to be addressed immediately. And there is a way to address it.
Close the border.
Well, yes, close the border. Now, what a lot of people don't know about immigration, our country allows legal immigration of over 1.1 million people per year, every year. We have a population of 333 million folks or so. So we let in far more people than any other country in the world every year legally. Now that number is jumping and jumping. And the problem with the people that are coming here, these are not guest workers that we're talking about. These people are going to be a giant, they already are. They're a giant taxpayer funded money laundering operation. Many of them are criminals. They're not being vetted at all. And they're being put on airplanes, and they land in the middle of the night in every state, in every city in this country, including Idaho, Coeur d'Alene, Nampa, Idaho Falls, everywhere. And that is not a good thing and needs to be stopped immediately, as far as I'm concerned. That would be my number one priority if I make it to Washington.
So one of the biggest, and I hate that I'm using the liberal media for anything, but I want to see where you're at on this.
Huh?
A lot of the liberal media will say, well, Republicans just want to shut down the government if they don't get their way. And I'm cool with shutting down the government forever, as long as we get, the Defense Department maintains and the borders. Like, I don't care about the federal government at all.
Right.
Are you willing to shut down the federal government over border security?
I am, but not the entire government. I mean, let's face it, the government itself, the United States government, is like this giant, massive spinning ball. And even if you tried to stop it, you couldn't stop it. You could slow it down quite a bit.
Right.
So I would be in favor of stopping some of the bureaucratic, unnecessary portions of government that would make it painful enough to get people's attention. But I'm not talking about stopping people's Social Security checks. I'm not talking about stopping our military functions. I'm not talking about shutting down air traffic control systems. But the rest of the bureaucracy, yeah, sure, we could shut it down it wouldn't be shut down for long, number one, before people would say, okay, all right, we do need to close that border, and let's go back to some reasonable, good decision making. That's not where we are right now. And that is the only lever that a member of Congress, we were talking earlier about specifically what would I do? I would
Right.
be digging in my heels along with some of the other Freedom Caucus members to say, you know what? We're not funding a darn thing. And the heads of these giant agencies, the heads of these giant three-letter agencies that are facilitating these unconstitutional acts, their paychecks would be the first ones I'd stop. Let's start with them, not the rank and file of the Border Patrol. Let's start with the guys that are making the decisions about the Border Patrol.
Yeah, the interesting thing with this, and I like your point about we let in a lot of immigrants to come work and all that stuff. That's great. America's supposed to be the land of opportunity, but I don't think people really understand the scale of what's going on right now. Elon Musk has been on this, and he tweeted out something like, in October, November, there was 260,000 people estimated that they know about that came across the border. Think about that. 4 months, you get half of the entire population of Idaho, 1 million people. 8 months, you get an entire state of Idaho. The Boise metro area is 800,000 people-ish. That's what,
Mhm.
2.5, 3 months, 3 months.
Yeah.
You are getting entire, and like for me, it's like I understand that we're putting a lot of people in shelters and they're becoming homeless in New York City and Chicago, and like I love that Republican governors are doing that, but like our infrastructure is going to be tested in a way that like I don't like. I'm not an expert in these things, but it just kind of seems like importing 1 million people every few months is not a good way to live and not really good for society. So what a mess. What an absolute mess. I don't know.
Well,
I guess there's no
the
question there. I
thing,
just hope people
yeah.
understand the scale of this problem. Does that make sense?
Well, the people that are facilitating this are the wealthy, the elite, the one percenters. Again, they don't care about what's happening in flyover country because it doesn't affect their daily lives.
Right.
People like Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and others, both Republicans and Democrats, they are not directly affected by the decisions that they make on a yearly basis. And they make
Right.
lousy decisions. Who would argue otherwise? They're
Yeah.
horrible. They're bad at governing, and they need to be swept out of office.
Well, it's interesting you say that because I raised this point a couple months ago on my Twitter, which is just full of crap talking people. But it's interesting that if we jaywalk, if we break the law, there is a punishment affixed to that, right? If we go against what government tells us not to do and what we've agreed as a society not to do, we get a punishment. But if the Supreme Court or Joe Biden or whatever completely ignores the Constitution and acts in an unconstitutional manner, there is literally no punishment at all. None. Zero. It's unbelievable. And I don't know how you fix that. I really don't, because some people, there's lots of interpretations about what's constitutional, what's not. But I think, securing our border is literally part of our Constitution. It's a duty of the federal government. And yet we still have people like Joe Biden and Mayorkas ignoring all the law. So you bring that up, and I kind of find it fascinating. There's no punishment for people who do unconstitutional things while in office. It's unbelievable. So let's move on to another topic real quick. We got about 18 minutes left. Okay. Immigration and the border. That's the easy number one answer. What's the number two problem facing America these days?
Well, I think on a national level, certainly would have to be inflation. You think about a regular family, a young couple in their 30s with a couple of kids, trying to afford a mortgage, trying to buy maybe their first home, just trying to get by with day-to-day life, and the cost of goods and services keeps going up. I find it just ridiculous that this consumer price index, which is widely talked about on television and radio, consumer price index does not include food or gas, energy prices, or food. Now,
Yep.
I don't know what else you're supposed to be spending all your money on, but those are kind of the big two things. And so they try to tell us that the CPI is only going up 3-4%. Well, all the normal people that I know that are good at math, not Common Core math, real math, they'll tell you that inflation has gone up 30-40% at least minimum while Joe Biden has been in office. This is another example of a deliberate self-inflicted wound, and it goes back to poor policy decision. They say that elections have consequences. Well, poor policy has consequences also. And the poor policy that they put in place has to do with our domestic energy production. Right. We stop drilling, we stop fracking, we start importing. I'm from New Mexico originally. The Permian Basin, which is West Texas and southeastern New Mexico, has enough oil and gas under the soil there to power our entire country. The entire country could be fueled by the Permian Basin for 200 years. And yet we're trying to put up windmills and green energy stuff. I hate to be such a cynic, but sadly, this is a true statement. Washington, D.C. has become nothing more than this giant taxpayer-funded money laundering operation. And you can see that in the energy policy. They don't care about battery cars. They just want to make their friends rich.
Yep.
You see them sending hundreds of billions of dollars to a far-flung war in Ukraine versus Russia, when we have homeless veterans right here in America. We have people that are low income needs. that are now being forced out on the street. We
Actually,
don't have a revenue problem. We have an aim problem. We have plenty of revenue to solve these problems, but
yep.
they're not willing to do it.
I sometimes wonder if the people in Washington like hate us, like just straight up hate us, because I don't know. It's how they act differently if they didn't hate us. I don't know. But it's funny to me because I always, I spend time on Facebook because I do social media marketing and I, pay attention to what people are saying. And it's funny because there's a meme that goes around all the time, and it's about how we've been watching all these dystopian movies and we're literally recreating them and we're going along and there's no resistance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's funny to me because contemporary America seems like the Hunger Games, right? Mm-hmm. You've got all these districts where we provide all the goods for and the tax money because we're tax cattle for Washington, D.C. Right. And yet they just crap on us and crap on us and crap on us, send, thugs to investigate us, and I don't know. It's so frustrating.
It's very frustrating.
And actually, that's something I want to bring up. I think I'm not a huge Donald Trump fan for myriad reasons, but he has done some good for the country. And I think that one of the biggest things that he's done is shedding light on the deep state, which is the bureaucracy that is weaponized against Americans. I was just my I can't give specifics, but somebody in my life, they run a business and they're going through an audit from the government right now, a certain special type of audit. And I can't even talk about it freely because I worry that it'll get back to the inspector anyway.
Right.
And they're like, the guy is being hostile to him. And he's like, we need this. And not in a, like, they don't want to be, have illegal activities. They want to comply with everything. And my mother-in-law was like, just help us, teach us. Like, I want to comply. I don't want to be a nuisance, but I guess this all leads to the question, like the deep state is very, very real here in Idaho, but also in DC. It's weaponized to hurt people.
Yeah.
What do we do about that?
Well, I mean, you're looking at almost a biblical battle between good and evil. I look at it in those terms, and it's not just a United States issue. This is a global issue, a battle between literally good and evil, and it is reflected in our politics here. And I don't know that you ever eliminate evil or tyranny, but you have to fight that fight. And within the Republican Party, you even see that battle where you have the establishment, the people who are in power now and control the money, do not want to relinquish that power and the money that goes along with it. They are enriching themselves. If you need any evidence, just look at the net worth of the members of Congress and how magnificent they are at trading stocks these days. So it's corrupt from top to bottom, including in the parts of Idaho in the state government. The federal government uses financial pressure, extortion, if you will, on most of the governors in the United States. And they say, we'll give you $2 billion for this, that, or the other, but only if you implement this program in your police force or that program in your school system. And not too many governors have the wherewithal to say, no, thanks, keep your $2 billion, because they do the same thing. They enrich their friends and family and business associates with who gets the money. Now, I've been to Washington, D.C., and right there on the end of the National Mall, right by Congress, is the National Botanical Gardens. And if you haven't been there in a while, there's this giant, massive tree. It's like, I don't know, it's like 2 miles tall. And it's called the COVID tree. And whenever they need more money, they just go pull a bunch off of that COVID tree and send it out to the governors and whoever else they think wants some money off of that tree. They always refer to it as, federal money. I look at that very different. That is my taxpayer dollars being returned to me. And I'm not stupid how that works. It's a shell game. And, that's a long answer to a short question, but our whole system is basically a giant taxpayer funded money laundering operation. I'm not anti-government. I'm anti-corruption.
Right.
And there's a difference.
Absolutely. Got about 10 minutes left. And it's actually midnight. It's almost midnight here in the East, so I want to stay on time.
All right, cool.
We got a lot to do tomorrow. Let's talk about your opponent.
Okay.
There are so many things wrong with his record, but give me three reasons that Idahoans should not reelect Mike Simpson and instead should choose Scott Cleveland?
Well, I'll start with probably the biggest one of all. Mike Simpson is leading the charge to remove 4 dams on the lower Snake River, and his reasoning for doing so is very flawed. And it's that decision, if that goes through, that is detrimental to the economy of not just Idaho but the surrounding region.
Right.
And it's not just a water issue, it's not that we're watering the grass. It's not just for farming, but that water is very, very important. But what a lot of people fail to realize, it's not just the water, it's the power, the energy that is generated by those hydroelectric dams, of which Idaho Power owns a lot of it. If you want to see your electric bill as a consumer in Idaho triple, quadruple, let them go ahead and tear out those dams over there on the lower Snake River. Right. And your electric bill, I promise you, will absolutely triple or quadruple. That is unacceptable.
And keep in mind, if that happens, and that's literally what would happen, not only would your electric bill go up, every business that you do business will see an increase in electricity costs, right? And they're not just going to eat that and not make money. They're going to pass it on to you. So you talked about inflation earlier in this call.
Right.
That's another driver. That would be another driver of serious inflation in the state of Idaho. And by the way, liberals, I know you love the fish, and we all love to fish. It's part of Idaho. I don't necessarily fish. I do other things. But like hydroelectric is really clean energy. Like, what are you doing? What are you doing? So,
well, I propose not only should we not breach those dams and take them out, that's just ridiculous. We should be considering building a couple more of them, because it is clean energy, and water is a very abundant resource in the Snake River Valley. If you know anything about it, that's not a river like the Rio Grande, where I come from, that dries up to just a trickle every summer. The river stays nice and full most of the time, and a lot of people don't realize that. So I would consider adding a couple of dams where it's environmentally acceptable to do so. And to touch on the energy topic, one more thing, we have a resource right here in Idaho National Laboratories. It's a nuclear research facility, but we should take that and we should actually build our own nuclear facility in Idaho. You need lots of water to keep it cool. We have the water to do that. We could produce that energy here. We already have the brain power to do it. And if I had my way, much of the electricity in the country would come from nuclear power. There is modern technology, how those plants work, way beyond what happened in Chernobyl and some of these other places, 3 Mile Island. The waste can be handled safely. My late father-in-law retired from the Department of Energy. My father worked for Sandia National Labs down in New Mexico. We have that here. We should take full advantage of it.
Right. Okay. What else is problematic in his record?
Well, I think that Mike Simpson is a very left-leaning person. He's what I call a blue Republican or a fractional Republican. Does he vote conservative enough times to get away with being called a Republican? Yes, he must, because he's still in office. But
I don't know that that's true, because Eastern Idaho is kind of a purple district. But we'll go with your line right now.
He's still the guy in office, but some of his issues, I don't want to pick on the man personally. I wouldn't pick on his age or his health or anything like that. But I think when somebody's been in office for that long, they're just kind of mailing it in. They're just mailing it. They don't really care what meaningful legislation happens. But a couple of things that I think he's angered conservatives about is his position on, gay marriage and the LGBTQ transgender agenda. I think he's pro LGBTQ plus, and I, in fact, am not.
Right.
I do not agree with that philosophy for any number of reasons, and we would disagree and have very different voting records as a result of that. Another thing for me is I think the reckless spending. Now, you might not realize it today, but when Mike Simpson took office in 1999, the federal debt, the national debt, was a mere $5.6 trillion. and he's been in office for 25 years straight.
Yep.
That debt, I just looked at it this evening, it's clicked over 34 trillion, 34.1 trillion with a T. Do you know how many zeros are in a trillion?
I can't even count that high.
12.
Okay, that's good.
A lot of zeros.
That's a ton.
Okay. And that is on them. For somebody who's supposed to be fiscally responsible, that is anything but. And he likes to brag about being on the Appropriations Committee.
Right.
Well, but in my opinion, this bunch in Washington's been doing a little too much appropriating. $34 trillion. But just 2 years ago, when I was running against Mike Crapo, that number was 31 trillion. It's gone up that much in 2 years.
And it's interesting because I think a lot of people judge their congressmen by what they bring home, right? And a couple of years ago, we had two congressmen who represented totally different ideologies. Raul Labrador, I'm a fanboy of Raul. I will support him through thick and thin. I'll run through walls for the guy because I think he's principled, one of the most principled politicians there is these days. But he represented a different type of politician, which he wasn't judged on. And there were people in my circle who were like, oh, Raul just named a post office and that's all he did in Congress. Well, he also stopped Obamacare Light. He did a lot of stopping stuff. Right. It's interesting because while Mike Simpson brags about being a conservative in his phony press releases, he also at the same time says, we got millions for this, we got millions for that, we got millions. And his job, he thinks, is just to grab a shovel and shovel stuff in the truck, his Idaho truck with 400,000 miles on it, just shovel bags of money in there and bring it home to us. That's not what we want. We don't want anybody to do that. And what he'd say is, well, it's going to be spent anyway. Stop spending it. Stop spending it. We don't want any of this. So that's a really good point. Scott, we've got to wrap up.
All right.
Like I said, it's midnight here. So the deal that I always have with my candidates is you've done me a favor by coming on the show, explaining yourself, introducing yourself to voters. Tell my followers, my listeners, how they can follow you, learn about you, donate to you, learn more about your platform.
Sure. That's great. Well, we're excited to be on your show, and thanks again for having us. We're going to be hitting the road next week. We're going to hit the Lincoln Day circuit. That starts next week. We're going to spend a couple, 2 or 3 days over in Idaho Falls in the Twin Falls area. And it's basically 3 days on the road, 3 days in the valley. And hope people will come out and hear me speak in person and introduce themselves and tell me what their issues are. I mean, I have an idea what my issues are. Our website, because we got a little late in the game here, our website should go live next Wednesday, and knock on wood that will happen. It's a real simple one. It just rolls off the tongue. clevelandforcongress.org. clevelandforcongress.org. That'll be the hub for everybody to get information about our events and so on, and to reach out to me personally. I'll try to get back with as many people as I can. I've got some radio and television interviews, podcasts that are going on. And we're excited to be out there, and we're excited to represent the 2nd Congressional District for sure.
Very good. Scott, thank you so much for coming on. We appreciate you. Good luck. And maybe we'll have you back on as it gets closer to the primary.
Time for a new truck, brother.
Hey, have a great night, sir.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Goodbye.
Bye-bye. Scott Cleveland, solid conservative, it seems like. Really good dude, good conversationalist, great interview. I think he's got some serious challenges ahead of him. Getting into the game a little bit late, fundraising against Mike Simpson, who has all the special interest money in the world. So it's going to be an interesting race to watch. And again, the disclaimer that we always give it here at Freedom Bros is any candidate for any race can come on and explain their position. So Mike, if you want to come on and talk about the race, talk about why Scott Cleveland isn't the right person for your district, please feel free to come on. I don't think you will, but the invitation is there. Before we close the show tonight, I can't say a ton about some stuff that's been going on in my life lately, but I will say this, a message to all the patriots out there. And I use that term very, very intentionally. 2024 is an election year. We already knew that things were going to get crazy with the presidential election, and they're already, I mean, Democrats are, as much as I don't like Trump, Democrats are trying to throw Trump off the ballot everywhere. That's un-American, quite frankly. And the craziness is only going to escalate as we get closer to the election. The same thing isn't going to happen here in Idaho. It's already happening. Some of my friends, I've been targeted with harassment from anonymous, cowardly people bringing my family into politics, because there are groups of people in our state who have power, who have money, but who see their grasp on power loosening quickly, because conservatives are absolutely winning the races that they need to win, and they're taking the good old boy network and throwing them out to putting them out to pasture. But these folks, they have an addiction to power. They have an addiction to the money that comes in. They have an addiction to being able to get the lobbyist dinners, get the big contracts for PR. They are addicted to the power that they think they hold. We're taking it from them. They're not going to let it go without a fight. A lot of you out there over the next 5 months between now and May 15th are going to be involved in politics. You're going to be involved in campaigns, races. You're going to write letters to the editor. You're going to door knock. The first thing I would say is protect yourself. This is a constitutional carry state. You should absolutely carry a gun and protect yourself. Number 2, just be ready. I guess there's no number 2. It's just be ready for all sorts of shenanigans, all sorts of lies to be made up about you. It's been a really tough week in my house because of somebody who has chosen to lie about me and my family and bring my family into politics where it didn't need to happen. This is the price we pay for fighting for liberty. They're fighting for crony contracts, for power, for prestige and status, lobbyist dinners, the ability to say which way a bill will go. They're fighting for that. We're fighting for our families. We're fighting for our kids. We're fighting for our future. We're fighting for way more. And some of us are going to pay a personal toll, a very high personal toll for that. But stay strong, because what they want is for you to sit down and shut up and just vote the right way, but don't influence anybody. Don't take their power from them. That's what's happening. There is no trick that they will not pull out of their little bag and their toolbox to hurt you, harm your family, and try to preserve their power. It's a sick, sick game. So I know I didn't want to end the show on this note, but it's true. If you're a conservative in Idaho, you read in scripture about having to gird up your loins before going into battle. Well, we don't have physical battles these days. You need to protect your heart, protect your family, protect your safety, and go and fight like hell. That's all I'm going to say about it. But please protect yourself, be smart, and understand that these people will say anything about you, anything, to ruin the momentum that we have. It's a sick game, and I hope none of you get hurt by it, but it's probably coming. So with that, thank you for joining Freedom Bros. We will play the over-the-top stinger. We'll get out of here. Next week, we are going to have a legislative candidate, Lamborn. I should know his first name. James Lamborn, I think is what it is. I am not prepared for this. I just got off a plane like 2 hours ago. Anyway, we'll have James Lamborn from District 28 here to talk about his campaign, and we'll keep rolling out the campaigns and educating you as we can. And thanks for all your support, your love, your prayers, and we'll talk again soon. Thanks for watching Freedom Bros.